the Ten Commandments, kind of. Although we do have to be very clear on that the Ten Commandments, as they stand written in the book of Exodus and Deuteronomy, really, I'm quoting Luther here, really do not concern us Christians. There's a dead silence on that one, isn't there? Think about it. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. It's talking about court of law. The kid who's 14, that didn't apply to him. Don't commit adultery if you're not married. That didn't apply to you. Well, we immediately make the jump, don't we? The connection. Well, you know, you got to dig down there. Well, we do that. But as the commandment stands there, it really doesn't concern us. The last one, which deals with don't covet your neighbor's oxen or cattle or manservant or maidservant. How many of you own any oxen and cattle anymore? I mean, that doesn't concern us. And even Luther's explanation there needs to be updated too, because this explanation speaks to people living in Germany in the 16th or 17th century. And suburban America doesn't apply to us. Read his meaning and see what I mean. So the Ten Commandments, really, we use them because they're a nice summary of natural law, but frankly, what applies to us is not the Ten Commandments per se, it's natural law. And that's why we Lutherans do not get bent out of shape either, folks, by how we number the commandments. Now, if you go to Northwest Bookstore, you'll see these plaques with the Ten Commandments. They've got Commandment 1, don't make false gods. Number 2, don't make graven images. Number 3, don't misuse God's name. Number 4, remember Sabbath day, right? 5, that's how they do it. And they'll accuse us Lutherans that we number them wrong. Why? Because we take out the old Commandment 2, throw it out, which is don't make graven images. Catholic Church throughout centuries ago, because they had crucifixes. They didn't see that was a sin. Where did Jesus forbid that? That was a timely prohibition for the Jews coming into Canaan, where they had statues and idols of their false gods. People were superstitious. So anyway, back to the issue here. So that what is natural law for us. Why? Who are you to pass? I'm in verse 4. Who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? Verse 5. One person esteems one day better than another, while another esteems all days alike. Everybody should be convinced in his own mind. The one who observes a day observes it in honor of the Lord. The one who eats, eats in honor of the Lord. He gives thanks to God. While the one who abstains, abstains in honor of the Lord and gives thanks to God. None of us lives or dies to himself. Verse 10. Why do you pass judgment on your brother? Why do you despise your brother? We will all stand before the judgment seat of God. Verse 13, therefore let us not pass judgment on one another any longer, but rather decide never to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of a brother. Now, stumbling block or hindrance, again, he's not talking about just a little offense. People get offended at all kinds of stuff, right? Get offended, I wear a clerical collar all the time. Get offended, I drive a car that doesn't look very pastoral. Well, now that may be a problem. That's against the fourth commandment. I'll grant that. And I don't do that too much. The issue for us here is by our activity, are we causing a person to not listen to Christian faith and fall away from it? Now, I would say in India, we have to be very careful. We cannot do probably there, if we were missionaries or living there, what we can get away with here in the United States because of their Hindu pagan background. You understand that? We'd have to be very cautious here. One little issue, I don't know if I shared this with you, that they have trouble with in India is if you go into a pagan temple in India, they have bells at the entrance door. Did I tell you the story? When you walk in, they ring the bell, and that's supposed to wake up the god, whether it's Vishnu or Shiva, whatever the case may be. And now you see in Christian churches, sometimes one of the Lutheran pastors, he's a former Indian, was worried because one of his members who converts donated a bell to the church and hung it at the entrance to the doorway. Now there's a problem, okay? And the guy was struggling with whether he should leave that there because of the background in Hinduism. For us, that's a no-brainer. Who cares whether you have a bell at the entrance of the church? We all have bells, but in India, problem. So you see, we're always thinking of the Christian faith, what's going to benefit, hurt a person's faith. And everybody takes offense at little things, and Paul's saying we shouldn't be doing that. Verse 15, if your brother is grieved by what you eat, you're no longer walking in love. So what is the principle here? Not I will do what I want to do. What's the principle? Love. Agape love. Do what is right for the benefit of the other person. And while in my freedom, I'm able to do anything that doesn't contradict the Ten Commandments, I may curtail my freedom at times for the sake of a weak Christian, or one who is considering the Christian faith, or for the sake, maybe, of peace in the congregation until we work something out. Does that make sense? Okay? I want to end this up here. Romans 15, verse 22, 23 first. Whoever has doubts about what he does is condemned if he eats, because the eating is not from faith. Whatever is not proceed from your faith is sin. So we need to be convinced in our own minds that we are at peace with God, and these kinds of frivolous things, and they are often very frivolous out there, and it's very frustrating how these frivolous things, I hope I'm not using that word too loosely, are often the things that will disrupt and destroy a congregation. Isn't that a sad thing? Very seldom do we actually fight over really meaningful matters. We're fighting over silly things about how we should dress, or what food we can eat, or how we should bow, or make the cross, or not all these silly things. He goes on in Romans 15, we who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Who were the strong here? Apparently those who weren't bothered by what they ate. It made a difference. They understood that the gospel has set us free from these things. Now let's apply it again to ourselves today on this issue, whether it's trick or treating, or what could be another issue. Whether you dress a certain way as a Christian, whether you bow at the name of Jesus, whether you make the sign of the cross in yourself, whatever. These things do not make us closer to God or bring us farther away from God. These are ideophoristic things. Yeah. Yeah, listen to rock and roll music. Well, it used to be having your hair too long. Women were not allowed to wear pants. They had to wear a skirt, long skirt. These rules, some of you know these things, they go on and on and on. And down in the South where I grew up, and I mentioned my sermon at Tori Anderson over here, she said she grew up, oh, there she is. I didn't grow up in the South, did I? Well, I thought I was the South. I didn't know there was any lower than the Ohio River. I thought that was it. Now I've learned something. There is another country down there called Tennessee. But Paul, get back to, I forgot where I was going with that. But Paul says, we who are strong have an obligation to bear with the weakness of the weak. And so I don't think we want to flaunt ourselves in our freedom in the gospel. On the other hand, getting back to that circumcision business, it becomes a whole new matter when someone insists that you have to do or not do a certain thing in order to be a Christian. Then, for the sake of weak Christians, it is our obligation to do it. I always tell the story about my wife said, I believe years ago at a conference, I think in Geneva, Switzerland, somewhere, an evangelism conference of some kind. He always told this story. Now, Robert Preuss never smoked a cigarette in his life. Not that he was against it for theological reasons, he just didn't smoke. He never criticized people who did. However, he was at this conference one day, and he was out in the hall, he told the server, I remember during a break, and there were a bunch of old bishops and pastors around there, Lutherans, most of them Germans, a lot of them Germans. The Germans all smoke, still do. He was out there talking with them, and some, as he put it, young twerp came up, or whatever he called him, and started lecturing this old minister for smoking a cigarette. He was harming the temple of the Lord, which was his body, which, by the way, Paul wasn't even talking about smoking there, he was talking about prostitution. And that's the context of that, but be that as it may. And Robert said that's the only time in my life I was real close to asking that fellow for a cigarette. Now you get the point, because he was, that this right, that this guy would come in and try to accuse this faithful old minister, who was probably 75 years old, he'd been a faithful pastor all his life, that he was somehow inferior or a sinner because he was smoking a cigarette. For crying out loud. What did that guy think he was doing? So, you know, and smoking a cigarette wasn't going to make that guy lose his Christian faith. You understand? He was just being pompous, a young fellow. If you have 1 Corinthians, Paul goes on and says, let us each, I'm at verse 2, let us each please his neighbor for the good, it's good to build him up. Whatever was written in former days